Welcome back to the Rice Report, our interview series. Today we have an extremely special guest, an interesting background story, a crusader who found something in life to really dig into and educate on, which we always love here. She's gone viral. She's going on all kinds of much bigger podcasts than mine. I'm very gracious to have her here today. She has been on everything recently, and she should be. It's important to understand, as we talk about on this podcast a lot, we do a lot of financial education, trying to explain what's happening in the world from someone who's been there. I'm not a big shot. I haven't been in the huge rooms. I've managed money. I've run my own companies. I've raised capital from VC and PE throughout the course of my career. And in my world, from an entrepreneur's perspective, those two things mean vulture capital and pirate equity. Those are what those two things mean from an entrepreneur's perspective. I find myself in a weird position in life because I'm speaking to someone who's very anti-PE while I'm actually helping raise capital for energy projects and computing projects, which is technically private equity. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't see the upside and the downside and how all weapons can be formed against you, and God will not let them prosper. And it's important to understand that as we go through this conversation, we're talking about the big boys. The big boys out there are as corrupt as you can imagine in this space. And that is not an understatement. So please today welcome Tiffany Cianci to the show. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us today. We're live streaming on her TikTok right now. I thank you for doing that. Hopefully all of you on TikTok will enjoy what we're talking about today because it's really going to flow. So Tiffany, how did you get here? You've become this emerging superstar over the past year, and it's not really your background, right? Like you start, walk us through the origin story, and we'll get into PE in a minute.
My origin story is long. I'll give you guys the Cliff Notes version, but I was somebody that had a whole career, retired from my whole career to go to run a small business I could bring my kids to work at. I bought a franchise. I was given the big pitch that it was a family business in a family franchise that had been founder operated for 46 years, that it was a place I could bring my kids to work to, that I couldn't, I didn't have to keep missing out on their childhood because I was traveling for my corporate job. And I did that. I dove head in to my franchise. I was bringing my kids to work. I was making a difference in my community, teaching special needs kids in a franchise called The Little Gym. And I was growing my brand. It was really amazing. I built an amazing community in my community, and I built an amazing village of support. I made friends in a town I'd never lived in before. It was great. I loved it. It was my American dream squared. I was happy. I was thrilled. And then COVID happened. COVID was the first glimpse we really had at how visceral our government's choosing of the winners and losers in the economy could be. We saw millions of small businesses close down where millions of big businesses offering the same services got to stay open. We saw 505 days of closures and 551 new billionaires made. We saw giant hardware stores like Lowe's and Home Depot able to keep operating while small hardware stores down the street were closed because they weren't considered essential, because they didn't have one service or another that they offered. And as a result, businesses like mine suffered. We suffered a great deal. I was closed for 17 months. Barely survived, but my entire franchise, like all children's services franchises, were left very, very fragile and at risk. And we fell or succumbed to risk of a private equity takeover coming out of COVID in 2021. There was a very dangerous private equity firm. They were called Unleash Brands. They were backed by 4 private equity firms, and they were creating an umbrella to gobble up children's services. They wanted to be a one-stop shop where they got children coming out of the birth canal and kept them until they left for college. And they wanted to buy up every children's services business in the United States. That was their plan. They called it the Candyland Board of Business. And they were going to get a kid at the beginning and keep them until they were 18 and squeeze every drop out of their families they could. Unfortunately, when they acquired our brand, they decided they didn't want us to have a union. And I was our union president. They had done this at several brands before us. When they got to those brands, their unions were enacting class action lawsuits for being lied to, for being threatened to give up their contracts, their existing amendments. As the president of our union, it was my job to stand strong for us. We hired counsel, we defended ourselves, and they sought very quickly to make an example of me to terrorize everyone else.
Sounds
as a
about
result,
right.
I lost my business.
Yeah, sounds about right. So Little Gym and my gym, very similar. We used to take our kids to that place when we were in California. Absolutely loved it. Loved the service. It provides joy and happiness for children, but it becomes a profit center.
Yes.
And that profit center comes with a major cost. One thing that I want to inject into this is that over the last 35 years in security law, Laws have been changed systematically for 35 years to make the CEO of any organization, the only obligation that they have, and I've talked about this a lot, is shareholder value. CEOs have no other absolute legal obligation by law to do anything but drive profit to shareholders. I don't think people realize as monopolies take over a country and that becomes the legal precedent, how dangerous that is for the 80% of the country that lives and dies in small businesses.
I talk endlessly about this particular issue because a lot of people think this is a party problem. The left are going to say it's a Republican problem, and the Republicans are going to say it's a Democrat problem. The reality is that every single president since Carter has loosened restrictions on private equity while tightening restrictions on where their duty is to their shareholders. The biggest guardrails were removed under Clinton and Obama, but they were done with bipartisan congressional support.
Yes.
This is a two-party problem.
Well, the two-party system by itself is nothing more than a distraction from the actual agenda. And that's always been the case. So if I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, you're actually probably part of the problem. Independent is what we need to be. And we need to have policies, not parties. If we follow policies, we'll find the right mix. So you're in this position right now. You're being ostracized as union president for doing what a union president is supposed to do, fight for their people, and you get ousted from this. That's angering, and then it puts you on mission. Did you know anything about private equity before this happened?
I knew Toys R Us. I knew Sears. I knew the big scary stories, and I also knew Bain Capital saved Domino's. I knew big, broad strokes, economic ideas. I had read articles that it was dangerous. And when we found out that we'd been acquired, I dove in very quickly. I am somebody that reads very quickly. I'm a pretty intelligent girl. That probably sounded egotistical. I don't mean for it to, but I am.
No, just watch a few of your videos. You're very well read. You're very educated. Yes, absolutely.
But I underestimated, I think what I underestimated was how effective their unethical conduct would be in hurting the people that I cared about, the people that I loved, and the way that they would be able to misuse what was supposed to be our justice system. I mean, remember, I'm married to a federal attorney. I believed in the justice system. So did my husband. We don't anymore. We're trying to find peace with that and find our way back to it, but we don't right now.
No, it's a huge issue. That is the problem. The judicial system is the problem in the United States because of lobbyists, and nobody lobbies harder than PE because they don't have to do it directly. They own all these corporations and they fund those corporations. And part of the allocation is for lobbying to specialists in DC, not only for the PE group, but for that company. So you're fighting a very long battle that has been going on this has been raging for the last 35 years, as far as back as I can look. And it looks like we've seen the same thing, the loosening of restrictions and regulations. There's also tax benefits that PE groups get that no one else gets. And these are guys who are making money literally off the backs of blue collar people.
Yes.
It's the saddest
secured interest loophole is something I've been talking about a lot. I'm sure we'll get to it.
But let's hop into it.
That is one minor way that they're able to extract all the wealth out of our economy, our middle class, and the working class of America. They're strip mining Main Street, and it's terrifying.
So let's go through step by step, because what I want to do is round this. I love going through facts, figures, numbers, history, and then at the end, theory. Right. So there's a reason for all of this, Tiffany. This is not coincidental in America. There's no coincidence that's happening right now. We are living through a long planned, well orchestrated, and well executed mission to put America on its knees. And PE has been the driving factor. Big evil PE. Again, there are good PE groups out there. There are people who are trying to build small businesses or maintain them for people. It's just few and far between, just like anything else. Money takes over, greed takes over, and you have really bad people doing things. But let's go through your video. I absolutely was blown away. There's very few things that I hear financially, but when I start hearing about $3.9 trillion CLOs in pension funds that I hadn't seen, I sought you out immediately. I'm like, we have to talk. And by the way, everyone on my Telegram and Twitter page was like, Eric, you got to get on your podcast. So thank you for coming on again. But walk through your video, the one that just went viral, because I think it was shocking to many. And then you and I can walk through some of the educational pieces to help people understand what this means and how we may be able to actually get out of it, because I think there is an opportunity for that.
You know, I literally eat, live, breathe, sleep private equity. People send me, I get sent hundreds of articles a day through every channel that I have. If somebody finds something new in private equity that's being announced, it is sent to me within an hour. And I didn't think there was a lot left for me to learn. I really didn't think there was a lot left for me to learn, but I had this one hang up that I kept going back to. And it really comes down to a personal thing. I could not understand how Joann's was suddenly bankrupt, not just bankrupt, because they were really in chapter 33. It was like their third round at a chapter 11, but they had recovered twice. They filed chapter 11 a year ago, but they were going to close a few locations and they were going to reorganize. We went from we're going to reorganize to we're closing every location, and something drastic had to change in that year because they had continued to build up assets and inventory during that time. Yes. None of it made any sense to me. And a lot of people, the naysayers in my comment section, which have actually not been that many, have said, oh, retail's dying. Of course they were going to go. Retail is dying. They didn't adapt. There is one industry that I personally, and anybody who's seeing tiny things here, that's all fabric. There is one industry where no professional is shopping online, where no small business owner is shopping online, and that is in crafting. Because if we can't put our hands on it, we're not buying it. We need to touch what we're going to work with. We need to know it's the quality we desire to get the effect of whatever craft we're engaging in. And so if we can't touch it, we're not buying it. And that's why when Joann's got so much wind in their sails coming out of COVID, 9.5 million new customers. And they had this huge, just climb to success after they had a rough IPO.
Yes.
I said, okay, great. We're on the right track. They were the last real fabric wholesaler that anybody could buy through that you could still touch, aside from Los Angeles and New York, where they have Mod, and those are for professional fashion houses. It was the last place that the home crafters could go and touch their fabric and make their money. And I want to stress, there are 2 million crafting businesses in America that are sustaining small families and families that need to make up the difference between paying their bills and not. Those are craft businesses on places like Etsy and small businesses in the TikTok shop. This is where they got their goods. And so when we eliminate or we monopolize the crafting industry, we're monopolizing 2 million small businesses that will now have to raise their price or shutter their doors. And it's going to hurt those American families that were using this to make up the difference. But I could not, for the life of me, understand how they went from we're doing a reorg to building up assets because our sales are climbing again, to 75% of our stores are performing, to 97% of our stores are profitable in the initial bankruptcy filing, to we're closing all of our stores. It just didn't square with me. And I'd been sent a ton of articles on it. I'd made some phone calls. I'd read all of the bankruptcy filings, and it said that the debt load was what did it. Yes. But I didn't understand how it changed because their sales hadn't really dropped. And then I saw one article in the Franchise Times. I read the Franchise Times daily. I read Barron's daily. I pay for those subscriptions. They're expensive subscriptions, and I get a lot out of it. And it said that they were having trouble paying their floating rate debt. And this floating rate debt, I was like, what is floating rate debt? I mean, I know what it sounds like.
Adjustable rate mortgage, same thing.
And I went to try to research it. There is not an article in a single financial publication in the last 5 years that addresses a private equity firm taking out floating rate debt or even discusses what it is. Not one. And I'm like, well, certainly I can't be the only one. I'm not the first one to see this. No way I'm the first one. And so I
might have been.
I doubted myself. And I started calling people that work at private equity firms that leak info to me pretty regularly. And I'm like, can you do some research on this? They sent me some financial investment prospectuses from JP Morgan and from Charles Schwab. And I'll be darned if I didn't look. And it said that these private equity firms, one of the big naysays of investing your pension there was that the floating rate debt was going to increase the debt load. And that was part of the risk prospectus. And I was
right there in writing.
Stunned that nobody has talked about the fact that we've seen this increase in bankruptcies. Private equity bankruptcies doubled 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then they doubled their closest bankruptcy year on record, aside from COVID, which I do not think counts. 2020 is an anomaly. We all knew that was an anomaly because tons of restaurants went out of business. Lots of things went out of business that otherwise would not have. But they doubled their next closest year of bankruptcies on record. And then this year we topped that by 30. And now we're on track to do it again. And I said, something has changed. Well, the only thing that changed were the interest rates. And I understood it if they couldn't take out more debt to dividend back themselves, to strip mine more wealth out. But it didn't make sense when they hadn't increased their debt load, like Joann's. Right. Unless their debt was climbing without taking on more debt. And it was.
And the excuse that's pre-built in there is, well, we didn't know. Well, if you look at some of the largest, you can look at Apollo or some of the huge PE firms out there. They're in Washington, D.C. every day. There is a representative on staff everywhere, including near the Fed. They knew what was coming and made no changes. They didn't try to refinance. They didn't try to find fixed rates. And now you have these collateralized loan obligations, these CLOs that are packaged off and sold to your pension fund.
And we should talk about the fact that on their other investment funds, they're shorting the stock and they're never going to have to pay it back now.
Of course they are. That's why GameStop became such a big monumental moment in U.S. history, because the little guys realized that the people on the verge of PE, where PE is going to need to come in and bail someone out, you can force that action with naked shorting. And it's done very commonly. They look at good businesses. They do a naked short on the stock. The company can't get lending anywhere else based on the stock. They come in as a Robin Hood to steal from the poor and give to the rich.
That's a dangerous word in the GameStop community. We don't like Robin Hood.
I don't like Robin Hood at all. I think it's ridiculous that they're now delivering cash to people. Like it's just a ridiculous operation.
Did you see they're entering the banking market like any of us would ever trust them again?
Right. Well, did you see what they did with silver? So you used to be able to buy physical silver, and now you can only buy paper silver. So it's silver for me, but not for thee. And silver is a great investment. I think people should all own some silver. It's absolutely going to do well this year.
Yeah.
But going back to the PE strip mining, which is a great, just to let most people know, the way PE basically works is a company, in most cases, the bigger PE firms, they go after bigger companies, and they go to big companies that have moderate to less than average balance sheets. And they basically say, you need capital to grow. We can bring you capital. We're going to go to a bunch of our limited partners, investors that give them capital. They ball it up. They invest it in the company. They take 2% from the investors for management and 20% of the profits generated by the game. And then it passes down to the actual business owners. It's actually not a bad model if done correctly. Unfortunately, we went through a 20-year run where almost every PE deal was done in non-cash terms. It was done on LBOs or leveraged buyouts. Yep. So they were taking big loans to make an investment. If the investment didn't turn out, the loan flopped, and the loan was put on the company and not on the PE group. These are dangerous
maneuvers. It wasn't put on the bank either, because the bank doesn't pass it along, we know now.
No, well, PE groups are bankers, right? Like private equity, investment banking, venture capital, they all do the same thing in very similar, but yet very different ways with different objectives. But what you're uncovering for people is that what we're watching, and this is so coordinated, in my opinion, with an economic collapse where you'd be able to crush small business and employment for middle income families. That puts them on their knees. You can have UBI and communism come in, no problem. But the PE groups are so closely tied to people of the Fed. Now, PE, when you get to over $1 billion in PE, you enter, and I'm speaking from a guy from finance. The more you make, the more people you meet. And the more people you meet, the more deals you can cut. And the more deals you can cut, the more greed that's involved. And the more greed that's involved, the more austerity is created. So there's two types of investors. One who want to create prosperity for the investment and thrive in that environment. And there are ones who make twice as much money on austerity, or chopping the business into pieces, like buying a car and selling it for parts. That's what most of PE has become in the LBO era. Is that kind of what you're seeing in your research too?
I think it's an understatement. A lot of people think that these private equity firms have money and they're buying these things. They're putting in 2-3% with their investors, and they're taking out 97% in debt. And they're just stacking it on the company. A lot of people don't understand how this works. I say, if you and me or anybody else buys a car, we sign our name on the dotted line. If we miss that payment, they take our car, and we have liability. It hits our credit report. We can't buy another car next time. But in the private equity world, the car buys itself. They take out a loan. The private equity fund takes out the loan, but they sign the car's name on the line. And then they stack it on top of the car. And then they're going to charge the car rent for a space they used to own, because they're going to sell their land out from under them. And then they're going to sell all of the gas and all of the backup parts they had in their storage unit. And then they're going to make them buy those back from them. And then they're going to charge the car a management fee and an advisor fee. And the car didn't have any of these bills before and was existing and doing great. And now suddenly the car has to make enough money to pay 5 debts it never had, plus all the debt that was stacked on top of them. They've got to rent a space, pay advisors, and somehow make more money and try to expand. And eventually, when you buckle under the weight of that enormous pile of debt, the car is broken down and the debt is passed on to the taxpayer. And all of the unemployed people that used to work on and in that car are now a problem for unemployment and the rest of us. And there are parking spots all over the world that are now empty that used to bring customers to parking lots.
The old saying used to be pass the buck. And in PE, in the last 30 years, it's become pass the burden. Right? the burden just continues to go downhill, and it continues to trickle down. At the top, they make the money, and at the bottom, it all folds. And in the end, it's a bailout. And the bailout comes in different formats, whether it's putting undue unemployment expenses on the general public, or eating the debt where the bank has to go back and go through the bankruptcy process. Tiffany, what you're doing right now is, I don't know if people are thanking you enough, because the education that you're providing for people. And at the same time, again, I'm going to say this over and over again, there are good PE groups that really want to put money into companies. Most of them put their own money in first, like we do. Our own money goes into a deal first. We don't do debt unless it's debt in our own name, period. We won't do it for the company. And if you're doing it that way and you're making a hedged bet that you think makes sense for a business to grow, that makes sense, it's a good deal. That's prosperity. But there are many vultures out there who are looking at something that has profit, that they can get a lot of debt because it has high profit margin. They grab the debt, they chew up the profit, and then ultimately they pass the debt onto the business owner, onto the bank, onto the unemployment agency, and eventually back to the government. Yeah. One example you gave that we were talking about on firsthand. This is such a shady game, because you can look at PE groups. Just go to like any AI system and say, list the top 100 PE groups in the country by assets or by value. And it's so top heavy. There's just this big, just like everything else, it's a very heavy top of the pyramid. But they are getting so sneaky with it. You've talked about HVAC, some of the local providers. I can tell you firsthand, one of the things that happened to us is our daughter is a competitive cheerleader. So you pay like, $1,000 to join the cheerleading, and then you go to the games, and now they're charging parents $10 to go to a game that we already paid for. And I said, how are you charging me to come to a game that I've already paid for to see my own child? And they said, well, we were bought by PE. And this is happening in kids' sports leagues. This is happening everywhere, but you'll never know, because what they do is they maintain the independent brand, so that they have this family office feel like, oh, it's a family business, even though they just took $40 million in PE capital. And
they just laid off half the staff.
Yep.
And now, yeah.
And they double the charges, they double the fees, they create their own competition. When you brought up
paying themselves rebate revenue on everything that's bought, so they don't pass along any savings to the families anymore.
Yeah, no, they're not investors. They're literally the casino.
Yep.
They're not the gambler. They're the casino. They're getting paid on everything that happens. It's a great business to be in if you can stomach it. It's just something like, I left Wall Street years ago because, to me, I just saw like I'm on the wrong side of history. I might be on the wrong side of things, for right side of things for my family, but the wrong side of history, because Wall Street has been this way since I was 23 when I entered Wall Street. Yeah. What you're doing right now, what I'm doing right now, is taking a risk, by the way, by talking about this, because it's the truth, and we should all be sharing the truth, no matter what that means, no matter what that costs, because we can actually create laws that restrict this type of activity, and then it could be a beneficial service. Yes. But right now, as it stands today, it's an unhinged, unmonitored, loosely they have a lot of laws. Don't get me wrong, Tiffany. There's a lot of laws that go into PE, but they're very loosely regulated.
Yes.
You see them breaking laws all the time that were written for them, but then they have so much lobbying power. And as we talked about in the beginning, they have so much judicial influence that they can actually turn the tables without you even knowing it. We live in, this is America. This is the American matrix that we live in. Yeah. And I think that feeds into a much larger problem, because a lot of these groups are the silent killers of the world. We all know about Google. We all know about Meta. We all know about the illegal antitrust violation monopolies that exist, that are the oligarchs that do run this country at this point in time. That's an undeniable fact. But let's keep going down the rabbit hole. Let's get to this this pass off to the pensions, because I think this is where it really hits home. We've talked about how it hits home, where I'm going to come in, grab all this debt, put it on you, rake in millions of dollars. Eventually, you're going to fail. We're going to have to fire people, because if we don't tackle this problem, Tiffany, right now, literally right now, as AI becomes a standard,
yes,
if we don't do this, those layoffs will go from 50% to 95%, because everything will be automated. This is a dangerous time for the U.S. worker. Let's get into the pension. So what happened in the last 5 years that balled up over $3 trillion in debt that you probably, you people watching this who have a pension, you are actually involved in this and do not know it, because most people don't look at their pensions holdings.
Yeah. One of the questions I asked myself immediately after getting the information that this floating rate debt was being stacked in all these leverage buyouts was why the banks would do it. Like, don't they bear risk? What's going to happen when they can't pay it back and they all go bankrupt? Any banker, anybody who's studied private equity is acutely aware. The first time a company is acquired by private equity, their chance of going bankrupt in the next 12 months goes up 11 11-fold. The
Yes.
second time they change hands to a second private equity firm after the first flip, it goes up 23-fold, their chance of going bankrupt. So I just asked myself, why would the banks take this risk? They have to know that their chance of not getting this debt paid. Why are they giving these loans? It doesn't make any sense to me. And the answer I was given was as plain as the nose on your face, because they're going to sell the debt immediately. They're going to sell it to somebody else to take on the risk. They're going to repackage it. I'm like, what do you mean they repackage it? Repackage it as what? Well, there's about 6 different products they can repackage it as. One of the most significant is CLOs. Now, anyone who survived the 2008 collapse or has ever watched The Big Short knows that while the adjustable rate mortgages were like the kindling, and the increase in rates was the flame, the CDOs, the repackaging of that debt, and the synthetic CDOs were the kerosene and then the atom bomb that came down.
Yep.
And so when I hear that they're taking all of this incredibly risky debt, we know that these bankruptcies are spiraling out of control. We know that they're on an increased trajectory that is like literally record-breaking numbers of these bankruptcies. Why are they giving this debt? And the answer is they are rebundling it into CLOs and 12 other products, and they're repackaging it as safe, diversified debt, and they're selling it to the pensions and other investment funds.
And that ultimately becomes your retirement. Your retirement becomes this bad debt. And let's go back to the floating rate. So floating rates, I think Joann signed their original deal in 2019, so right before 2020. They took on about $1.2 billion in debt, I believe.
And they already had a remaining $600 million, I think, from the prior acquisition that they were paying down.
Correct. So they're just stacking it on and stacking it on. Their original round of debt, though, was fixed. Yes. I put this in perspective that people will grasp. So you're buying a home. It's 2019. In 2019, we had a great economy, right? Things were going very well under Trump.
Interest rates were great.
They were zero. They're still at zero. Yeah, we lived through the ZIRP, zero interest rate.
Yep.
And we're sitting there. So not a bad bet in 2019. It turned out to be a horrible bet. But what people don't realize is as soon as you sell off the debt, you can't renegotiate it. It's no longer your debt. So that debt just goes into a pension who can't renegotiate it either. So it's a security for them. A security can't come in and renegotiate the debt. It's just what it was. Like whatever you purchase, that's what it becomes. So 2019, they take it on. Again, in 2022, did Joann take on more debt in 2022?
I know there was another dividend push. It is my understanding they took on some more debt, but they also did some leaseback work in that time frame. So it's a little bit unclear how much they took on during that period.
Yeah, as the story unfolds for the rest of the world, you'll be able to see mechanically and methodically how this was done. And the beautiful part about this is that you're exposing this, and this is something that hit home because when Joann hit, I was talking about Olive Garden when it came out right away. Like, this is a travesty. Look how many jobs will be lost. My cousin worked at an Olive Garden through college. And you have these things that happen. We're Italian, so we can't really talk about Olive Garden that much. But my kids love it. Can't do it. My kids love it.
Oh, but they took Maggiano's too, and they took. I know. There's a lot of damage that's been done. Macaroni Grill went under private equity.
So we see this unfold with these groups, and now that bad debt that they purchased, just like you do a great job at referring it back to 2008. 2006 through 2008, everyone and their mother was taking an adjustable rate mortgage because we were at 0% interest rates. Then we had an economic collapse. Then we had contraction. And when that happened, they started raising rates. So as they started raising rates, you went from, just in this example, you had a $1,500 mortgage payment. Now it's $2,600 and you've got to refinance or lose your home. It's no different with floating rate loans when it comes to PE. These are the exact same model. So now you have these gurus, right? So these PE guys are on every panel you go to. These are the keynote speakers everywhere you go. So you're telling me the guys who are keynoting at the most expensive investment conferences in the country, that they didn't know that interest rates were going to go up after printing $6 trillion in 18 months? Like, that wasn't a feasibility for them. They knew exactly what was coming because it fits the PE, sell it for parts model perfectly. And you have the collateralization of the loans. You becomes a security, goes to a pension. Now, all of you who have a pension, not all of you, depending on your pension manager, you may be holding this bag right now that you don't understand, that ultimately is these loans are going to default and they are going to be recaptured, and you may get a payout from the government at some point in time for it, but more than likely, you're probably just going to be stuck with the bag.
I'm going to be honest. What worries me about the pensions, and I'm going to keep talking about this because there's actually an investigation I've been doing that the video is almost done actually, about how private equity contributed to the decline of Girl Scouts. A lot of people don't know that the Girl Scout bakeries, I don't know if you've seen all the studies about their cookies containing heavy metals and glyphosate and lead and all of these really unsafe levels. And now there's a class action lawsuit against them. But their bakery was sold to private equity. But their pension was also bankrupted due to a bad private equity investment, the Girl Scouts of America. And a lot of people don't know that. The reason I kept looking at why pensions were stretching past their projected or their goal-oriented investments, because pensions are by law supposed to be diversified. And by law, pensions do have quite a bit of oversight. The thing is that depending on the type of an investment you engage in, it depends on how frequently you have to update the underfunded numbers on your books. Almost all pensions in the United States are underfunded because we're living longer than we were when they started. That's a fact. And they didn't properly calculate how inflation would go. And especially with inflation now, there's a lot that's wrong, okay, with pensions. But with most investments that pensions invest in, they have to update the numbers of their funding levels every quarter with the dividend reports and the quarterly reports, except in the instance of private equity. When they invest in private equity, the average length of a fund is between 8 and 12 years, 10 being the mean. And when a fund is opened for 10 years, if they invest early in that fund, they get to put the projected returns on their books for 10 years. There is no update that comes. They don't come in and update their books and say, oh, we're 4 years in and our returns aren't quite where we wanted them to be. They get to keep that projected return on their books for 10 years. And that is a very cozy feeling for the fund managers that are dealing with the pressure and the government oversight of an underfunded pension. And as a result, you see pensions also making questionable decisions. And that's why we're seeing a rise in pensions suing their own funds for making risky investments in private equity right now.
Yes.
They're taking the easy out and knowing they're going to pass it along to another fund manager in another year or 2 years or 4 years. But in 10 years, it's probably not their problem. The problem is that when those chickens come home to roost in 10 years, it's going to crash down on you like a tidal wave. And it's going to drag the entire pension down with that ship. The anchor is going to drag it to the bottom of the ocean. And that is scary because we won't see these problems for years.
And another analogy to this, like financial laws are fascinating because we have this illusion in America that anyone can make it, right? That's just simply not true. Like most of the best investments in the world are for accredited or qualified investors only. So you have to, that old saying, it takes money to make money, that comes from the accredited investor laws. And now you have this analogy that you're drawing from the pensions, which I was loosely aware of. So thank you for sharing that with me. It reminds me of acquisitions in public companies, another massive fraud. So if I'm a public company and say you're making $50 million a year, you're a company, I'm a company, you're making 50 million. I can come in and buy 51% of your company, but I can record 100% of your revenue on my books. These are legalized ways of fraudulently promoting investments to the retail sector of our society. These are dangerous, dangerous avenues to go down. And we're not going down them. Clinton and Obama ran them through. Like these things just went through with ease. The Obama administration set this in place. That was the administration where it became basically a law where a CEO is not doing his job if he's not only focused and he doesn't have to worry about the community, the employees, product quality, just profit. Yes. And when you get into glyphosate and metals and products, this is also what PE does. They come into food companies. This is a very common practice. You come into a food company, everyone loves your food. You're like the greatest brand. It tastes amazing. You can't wait to buy more. PE buys it within, like, look at Wendy's. You can look at any of the fast food. Fast food used to be really good like 20 years ago. Now it's terrible because they come in and change the products.
The gold standard is Five Guys and In-N-Out, the two companies that refuse to sell to private equity.
Absolutely.
When it comes to burgers, they are the gold standard. And that's why.
Because they still taste so good. But you go to these other places and they look at it, they bring in analysts, McKinsey guys, they'll bring in McKinsey. If you don't know who McKinsey is, they're the devil in disguise. They're literally a pipeline from Harvard and Yale.
McKinsey, there are so many, I can't, go ahead.
I was offered a job by him years ago and instantly declined. Well, I was actually offered an interview. Let me be clear there, and instantly declined. But these guys come in and they look at it and they say, okay, you bought this company. You came in here to the PE group and the CEO, generally just the CEO. The board gets invited later. But they come in and say, listen, profit margins need to go up 6%. So we're going to stop using real sugar. We're going to use this fake sugar. We're going to stop using this ingredient. We're going to start using this synthesized ingredient. And now we're just sending slop out to the American people. But we made 6% more this year and our investors got a 12% yield. This is a huge problem, guys. Huge. People talk about big food. Big food doesn't have a decision. The CEO of those companies, they basically lose board seats and votes in their own company when these large PE groups come in and pirate the capital. Like,
we're seeing that in Southwest Airlines right now as a real world example. Last night, I bought my last Southwest Airlines tickets. I have been a dedicated Southwest flyer. I was literally clocking 250,000 miles a year with them. And
wow.
I have been a dedicated Southwest flyer as a business traveler, because I was the business traveler that just wanted to get companion status to take my kids on trips. And I wanted to amass points that I could keep forever to take my kids on vacations when I wanted to do that. They went to all the places I wanted to go. Last night, I cashed in all of my points for one last trip for my kids before May 28th, because I'm not going to fly them anymore. I won't do it.
Walk me through the Southwest deal. Walk me through the Southwest debacle right now.
So right now, what we have is that an activist investment firm, Elliott Management, which is not Elliott Management, the investment firm that acquired 1.8 billion shares of Southwest, has a private equity arm, but they run the entire company under the private equity standards and the private equity philosophies. And so they're an activist investment firm that goes in and quietly starts to amass large swaths of shares of major corporations. And they do it so that they can force to get a seat on the board. And then they'll acquire more to force more seats to the board. In Southwest instance, they were able to force acquire 5 board seats. And they said and started stirring the pot and telling investors that they were not making money because Southwest needed to change everything. Now, Southwest came out last year and said, we're not changing everything. And they said, you will start charging for seat assignments and we will not do free boarding anymore. I don't think anybody minded that they weren't going to do pre-board or free boarding anymore. I think that was the one thing they could change, and they probably could have gotten away with it. It might even have helped things. Not everybody wants to get stuck if you check in 3 minutes late with a middle seat. Not everybody wants that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't mind. That might have been the one thing they could have forced the change on. But they came out last September and they said, we're going to change this one thing, but don't worry. We are still the Southwest you know and love. 2 bags still fly free. You absolutely still get to keep your points forever. We still have the best travel rewards program in the industry, blah, blah, blah. And they said that that was going to stay, that nothing these activist investors were doing was going to change that. Their CEO went to the mat on this. Well, lo and behold, 4 weeks ago, it is announced that not only have they now acquired 5 board seats, but that they are threatening to oust the CEO. And suddenly an announcement is made that 2 bags no longer fly free. In fact, 0 bags fly free. In addition, they've changed the rewards program and cut the rewards that you can earn as a regular non-business traveler. Unless you pay for their 4th tier, the highest tier of ticket, you're literally getting 10% of the rewards you used to get. And now all of their travel rewards are going to expire after 6 months. You no longer can change your tickets. One of the things that was great about
6 months.
One of the great things that was like that business travelers loved about Southwest was if my meeting changed, I could call them and change my ticket and just pay the difference.
Yep.
That is no more. That is gone. Unless you pay for Business Select, which is something that is literally twice the price of a regular ticket. You no longer get any bags for free unless you are an A-list select member, which means that you've taken like 35 flights this year, I think. And then, or no, that one's 50. Or if
Still,
you're
that's a lot of flights.
Holder, you can get 1 bag to fly free if you're a card holder, but not for everyone in your party, just you. Like my kids don't get a bag, just the card holder. They haven't announced how much they're going to charge, but we know it begins on Memorial Day, of course, to kick off the summer travel season, right? And what's happened is they came out and he tried to cover it. The CEO tried. He said, our DNA is not bags fly free. Our DNA is not that you get to choose where you sit. Sir, do you know what trademark you have defended in court over and over again and put small businesses out of business, suing them for using? Bags fly free.
That's right.
You own the trademark and you have defended it in court as integral to the DNA of your company. So don't come out now because you want to keep your job, but don't want to keep the company's integrity intact. And tell us that that's not in your DNA. Keeping your job and your bonuses must be. You don't want to give up that job, but you're not protecting your brand. You're not protecting your philosophy. You are not protecting your loyal customer base. And it is going to cost them.
Mm-hmm. And they're also buying out. So I live in a neighborhood with a longtime Southwest pilot. I think he's been there for 18 years. And they're buying him out. So they're going from...
Scared. The employees are really scared. I get messages every day.
They should be. This is going to completely throw off their economics and their standard. People work at a place, they get behind a brand and they want to believe that brand will never change. What you just described with Southwest using, when you hear the term activist investors, what they're doing is they are using generally capital that's not theirs, that comes from many times it comes from NGOs that they actually get capital from. They use this capital to buy shares. Those shares allow them to negotiate a board seat because they own so much. This is what's commonly called a hostile takeover. This is the term that used to be called, because it used to be quasi unethical or illegal, definitely unethical, but they changed the name from hostile takeover to an activist campaign. This is how communists work. We all know that. And this is what they do. They come in and they strong arm through shareholders, through share ownership, and they demand board seats, and then they put the activists at the board to get the agenda approved. Tiffany, did you watch the TV show Prison Break when that was out?
I watched the first season, but they kept not being done breaking out, so I stopped.
I was the same, and then a bunch of people on Telegram told me, "Oh, this reminds me of Prison Break." So, like in the past year, I've watched Prison Break, and in the end, you find out there's this company that controls the country, and they send their minions off to do these different dirty deeds to get them power. It was kind of a disclosure thing. It was way too long, and it was not really that good of a show.
Well, there's a ton of private equity in the prison industrial complex that has a long-term vested interest in keeping our incarcerated prison levels higher than anywhere else on earth. So,
of course, those who own the prison influence the laws and reduce the amount of tolerance for law breaking. So they fill their prisons constantly. I think 11.4% of all U.S. prisons are owned privately. We should never have a private prison.
I actually am working with a program called the 20% Project. I work with Michael Harris. He's the founder of Death Row Records and Godfather Records. He did 33 years for a crime he didn't commit. The victim, the witness that put him in prison recanted their statement 22 years in, and they held him for another 10 years.
Oh my!
And I'm working with him on a project because in America, we have 5% of the world's population and over 20% of the world's incarcerated population.
Yep.
And the private equity firms see it as big business. I don't think private equity belongs in our prisons. I don't think they belong in our schools. I don't think they belong in our daycare centers. I think there's a lot of places they belong.
No, I completely agree with you. I think we belong in like the energy sector. We belong in corporate finance. We belong in different areas, industrial stuff. Very good for that. But when you start getting into brands that service children, like your brand that you went with Little Jim, I mean, these are places where parents counted on those centers. If they were doing a date night, they could drop the kids off. They could drop the kids off if they were working, and the kids were getting exercise and love and teaching and learning things. And I think when we look at the prison system by itself, which is fascinating because no one's come on here and talked about this before, you have to look at the intertwining. So you're dealing with a guy who is a record label executive who went through this process. Yes. The record labels work with the people who own the prison systems to create more violent and degenerate music to lower the actual integrity of youth. Like my son's 15, so I get a chance, a bird's eye view of the new music, and I'm like, you can't listen to that. Like this is you can't do this. But it's so degenerate that it inspires kids to commit crimes because that's cool. That's what the guy on stage is doing, or at least telling you he did. And they fill the prisons with young people. This is literally how America works, Tiffany, and you are uncovering it every day. I am so interested in that project. If you can let me know how I can help with that in any way, I will be more than happy to.
Absolutely. One of the things that we talked about AI right before we went live, and just a few minutes ago where we said, AI is going to take a lot of people's jobs, and so is private equity. So my job is actually with the Open Source AI Foundation, where we are fiercely advocating for our government not to give Sam Altman a monopoly on American data. We want open source AI so we can create transparency and accountability. It has so many parallels to private equity and the risks it poses to our economy. So we can talk about that offline, but I would love to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually building a 20 megawatt facility with flare gas in Tennessee right now. So off-grid energy, zero cost because of the tax benefits and the amount of revenue we can do by extracting CO2 for high compute, AI, and Bitcoin. That's what my company does. We find new innovative energy arbitrage deals to promote the ability of open sourced everything. Decentralized everything. Yeah,
we have a lot to talk about.
we do. I'll be very interested in talking about that because most people don't understand the dangers of, and don't forget Larry Ellison in that equation. Larry Ellison has a severely long track record of wanting to digitally imprison humanity.
Well, he's about to get his hands on TikTok, and I was the leader of this day of TikTok protests, so I have a lot of opinions on that as well.
Oh, we're going to have to do another episode on that.
Okay.
We're definitely going to have to do another episode on that. By the way, most of my audience is going to love this stuff. Most people will be educated. Some people will be just thrilled to hear this because you're one of the only other people I talk out about. But if we stay silent about the things that are going on in our own industry, we're part of the problem.
Yes.
I was the one screaming at doctors in 2020, or 2021. How are you giving people injections that haven't been thoroughly vetted? I just never understood that. And it's the same thing in PE. Oh, it's okay. I'll have a great Christmas bonus. It'll be incredible. But what about the people that I grew up with? What about where, I'm from steel mill town. So as a kid, I still remember in Ford Heights, Illinois, watching the Ford plant close and go from a beautiful place into this truly dystopian nightmare. And all the steel mills closed from where I grew up. And watching people's parents get laid off. All PE.
When you look at Ford and their decline, you have to look at Dodge versus Ford and how that precedential court case started us on this path.
No, it really did.
Dodge versus Ford is a court case people grossly underestimate, where Ford was paying their employees more and doing right by their communities, and Dodge sued Ford and said their only duty was to their shareholders, and they had to stop paying a living wage, and they had to stop contributing to their communities because they were putting them out of business because they were making them look bad because no one wanted to work for them. And they won. And that precedential court case is what set us on a path to serving shareholders over communities. It's one of the reasons I like public benefit corporations so much.
I do too. And I think if you really research Henry Ford, you find out just how interesting and how much of a truth teller this guy was. Another thing about Ford that's fascinating is, thinking back to the Prohibition, Ford was making engines that ran on ethyl alcohol. They ran on alcohol, and Rockefeller wasn't selling as much oil. So Rockefeller paid to create the temperance movement, which eventually banned alcohol, and Henry Ford had to bend a knee and make gas engines. So he's been through a lot of things, but the Dodge Ford case truly is interesting to think that in America, paying higher wages and making better. See, this is back when maybe you're right on this. Maybe all the changes to securities laws for CEOs actually began with that case, because Ford wanted to pay people more money so they love their job and worked there for 20 years and did a great job and took pride. But that didn't fit into the market. You're probably dead on. That might be where the model of PE began. Oh, we don't like what the competitor's doing. Let's just make up a story about them and sue them until they change.
Anybody I'm older than most of my followers. I'm very aware of that. I wear a lot of sunblock, but I'm in my mid 40s. And anyone who is 35 or older was introduced to private equity pretty inconspicuously. They didn't even realize they were being introduced to private equity. It was watching the movie Pretty Woman.
True.
He was
do I have a story for you.
He was the bad guy because he broke up companies and sold off the parts. He strip mined these companies. And the old man on the other side that was trying to save his company was the good guy, because he didn't want to see his life's work broken up. He wanted to see his employees taken care of. And she changed him, and he suddenly wanted to give back to the community, and he didn't want to strip mine the community anymore. And the good guy became the good guy because he stopped strip mining corporations.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how most people are introduced to private equity. They just don't realize it. They've always been the bad guys when it's been done that way.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Always, when it's been piracy, it's always been that they were the bad guys. Just people didn't realize that that's what it was. They didn't equate the two.
That's true. And that story, the character for Pretty Woman, is based on a real person. And I've met this real person. I was at his birthday party in Los Angeles, and he invented the term activist. So I won't give his name because I don't want to get in trouble. But I met him years ago, and that was the introduction. Hey, this is so-and-so, and he's actually who Richard Gere in Pretty Woman was based on. So it wasn't a true story about him, but that's who the character was based on. This is a major industry. Public companies, I've run a couple public companies, and you can see, when they try to mess with your stock and all that kind of stuff. And, I worked with some of these groups, and they would continually tell me, hey, if you sneeze near someone that could help your business, put a press release out about it. It'll help pump the stock. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And so I didn't get along with that group to begin with. Walk us through. Okay. So we're running out of time. We have 10 minutes here. So we've gone through facts and figures, and it's been such a great conversation. Facts and figures, we've got these down pat. Anything else you want to get out in here before I can theorize that what the good side of this is going to be potentially with changes, and what the absolute guaranteed bad side of this is going to be economically?
What I can say is that right now we are on a runaway train on a snowball headed down a hill.
Yes.
When people tell me private equity is ruining businesses, a lot of people think 110 bankruptcies last year is not a scary number. What they don't realize is those bankruptcies weren't individual companies. Those were umbrella companies that owned dozens of other companies that had hundreds and thousands of locations. So 110 bankruptcies of umbrellas of companies. We are talking about the loss of 100,000 locations or 50,000 locations. But even the loss of these stores like Joann's or Party City, in and of itself is not the worst thing that's going to happen. The CLO is not the worst thing that's going to happen. It's that these create domino effects, just like we saw in 2008. In 2008, it wasn't the scariest thing that Kmart closed down. It wasn't the scariest thing that a bunch of grocery stores went out of business or Target closed down a bunch of their locations. In 2008, what was terrifying is that small business, 99% of all of the businesses in the United States are small businesses. And over the last 20 years, 99.9% of all jobs created in the United States were created by small businesses. Big businesses create efficiencies and reductions in force. Small businesses create jobs. And that's a fact. You can go ask Siri that if you want to, or Google it on your GPT, right? Whatever you need to do, you can ask whoever you want to, Llama, anybody you want. Small businesses create 99% of the jobs in our economies, okay? That's what they do. And they are 99% of the businesses in our economy. But it was when those big anchor stores were shut down in all those parking lots that the small businesses no longer had customers coming into those parking lots. And the small businesses fell exponentially. Maybe it was because they relied on those stores for materials they needed, but overwhelmingly, it was because they relied on those stores to bring the customers to their parking lot. People in America are stretched to the max.
Yes.
They are tired. They are overworked. They are underpaid. They're over leveraged. We have more debt than we've ever had. We have more student loans than we've ever had. We have more credit cards than we've ever had. They have more housing costs, more percentage of their paycheck going to basic necessities than we have ever had, ever. And at the same time, we have a 1% that is controlling more of the economy than at any time in American history, ever. And what we know is that people need convenience and they need efficiency, not because they wouldn't make the hard choice to drive to a butcher shop or a cheesemonger or a tailor, but because they are so overworked and overstretched that they simply don't have the time. And so we trade convenience for security and safety down the road. We just don't know that that's the trade we are making. Right now, we are at risk of every Joann's parking lot and every Party City parking lot in America and all of the 110 other bankruptcies that had hundreds of thousands of locations turning into all those small businesses going out of business because it's no longer convenient for the root of the people that are just trying to get by. The big thing, maybe a CLO is one of the big things. The pensions is one of the big things. The loss of the jobs at Joann's or Party City is a big thing. But the loss of all of those small businesses that now are going to lose the foot traffic that was keeping them afloat, that is the atom bomb. And we need to understand that in the shoes we stand in, we have very little control. But the one thing that every one of us can control is stopping going for the convenience, sacrificing the convenience, and choosing small businesses because they are the only path forward we have right now. That's it. That's what we have. That's what we can save. And I don't like saying that. I don't like saying it doom and gloom. I don't like to go Chicken Little and the sky is falling.
That's reality.
I want to be clear. The sky is falling. I gave an example on a podcast or on InfoWars, I think the other day. Somewhere I was the other day.
You've been all over.
I used to own a kids gym, and now I own a children's imagination studio. And I manage a kids gym in another state. We have birthday parties, and our birthday parties relied on Party City. There's a Party City in the parking lot with my imagination studio that these kids play in. And we shop there sometimes 8-10 times a week. When I'm in town, I'm a part of that cycle. I knew everybody at Party City. Every other kids business and every other event planning business in my little Frederick town in the mountains in Maryland, we relied on Party City for the supplies we needed to be a small business. Every once in a while, I'd have to go to Amazon because Party City, especially over the last 6 months as they were cutting their inventory in preparation for the closure, did not have what I needed. Historically on Amazon, I could get 16 plates, 16 cups, 16 napkins, and 2 tablecloths for $19.99 in any theme I wanted. Last week, it was the Lion King. I needed Lion King plates, cups, napkins, and tablecloths. And I looked online. I added them to my cart. They were $19.99, like they always had been. $19.99. The day after our Party City closed down, they were $34.99.
Are you kidding me?
That is what we are talking about when we allow these industries to be so consolidated that the consolidators, the survivors, are setting the prices because they no longer have competition. When my price goes up 74% in a day,
wow,
one day, because they no longer have competition at a retail level, that is what we are facing in every single industry in America if we don't start choosing the small businesses instead of the convenience. And we have to demand that Trump and this Congress step in and do their jobs.
And this is one area that I mean, I've been talking about this for 3 years. Antitrust laws. This is a monopolistic play to be able to steal from the small people, embellish the rich. Give you stats. You'd say the top 1%. The top 1% in America controls 24.5% of the wealth. The bottom 52% of America controls 2.2% of the wealth. That is socialism approaching communism. You get over 40% in the top 1%, that's communist. And we are getting close to that.
We really have to recognize that communism with oligarchies is when the government starts choosing winners and losers.
Yes.
In COVID, we saw them choose winners and losers. Every time we bail out a corporation, we are exhibiting socialism for the corporation while we are forcing capitalism and the trials, tribulations, and penalties that come with that on the small businesses and the working class. The big businesses are too big to fail, so they get socialism and they get bailed out. They should be allowed to fail so new competition can rise, but we are not allowing that. Instead, we bail out the big guys and we allow the capitalist effects to fall on the small businesses and the working class. And that is not capitalism. It's certainly not free market capitalism.
That is anti-free market. And I hate the term capitalism because that was created by communists too, but it is not free markets. Free markets allow people to fail. So one thing I got to say,
require transparency, and we don't have any of that when private equity is existing in a black box and all of the litigation is getting forced into secret arbitrations. We have no transparency. We are blind. There is no free market. We are in a crony, capitalist, manipulated socialism for the wealthy and capitalism for everyone else society right now, and we have to fix it.
That is absolutely what you just said is going to be a YouTube short. That is so well said. It's unbelievable how well said that is. One thing you brought to my mind as we close out here, I try to look at the long tail effects of everything. And I don't know that I've really taken enough time to consider the adjacent businesses. When you're talking about Party City, I was there when Party City went out of business in Sherman Oaks in California years ago. And we used to take our kids there. Actually, it wasn't Party City. It was one of their competitors. They went out first. Party City got all their business at one point. Yeah. But there's always a candy store next door, a cupcake shop. Because someone's going there with kids and you're buying stuff. You're like, oh, let's go get a cupcake. So that cupcake bakery.
Choose that spot because people who need party supplies need cakes.
That's right.
Okay. The restaurants that that have large event spaces choose spots adjacent. I went and interviewed people at 4 Party Cities yesterday on their last day. I interviewed the employees. And as I was sitting there and I was taking in the small businesses around them that were about to suffer, in one of the parking lots I was in, there were 2 event rental spaces and there was a bakery right there adjacent. And they chose those spots for that anchor location. The same way that the tailors and the people that offer sewing machine repairs are in the Joann stores. They're there because they were adjacent to the business that would bring them the business they needed. And those people have 10-year contracts now, and they're going to lose everything because Joann's never had a personal guarantee on their lease, but the small businesses all do. They don't benefit from LLCs like corporations do.
That's right. Yeah, personal guarantors it's a risky business. I've been one. I'm going to be one again here for our deal. That's what we do with what we're looking at. Now, the CLO piece, I think, is going to be resolved for pension. So let's kind of put that, I can't say that because I'm not in charge, but it looks to me like Trump is allowing the stock market to absolutely collapse without support. And that drives money into the bond market, drives the yields down. And then I think those loans will be, if nothing else, dealt with for a while on the pension side. I can't agree.
The pensions won't see it for 8 or 9 years for a lot of these collapses. We don't know that.
Correct. Well, for the cash flow purposes, they can. There are ways they can go through that and remedy that situation over 5 years. And I think that's probably their primary focus right now because pensions. But I want to go into this whole timeline chronologically. So 30, 35 years ago, you see these law changes. You see crony capitalism coming into a mass amount. There's a reason why everyone in DC You already know who they are. Like, who was the last new person in DC, right? They're all connected to someone. Most of them are lawyers.
Revolving door.
Yeah, PE, VC, they all get invited in. They now run the government. They're giving their buddies, all types of help. I will give a shout out to a VC who I think is doing a great job, which is David Sachs, who sold all of his crypto holdings before becoming the crypto czar. He's the only person who's done that, by the way. A big shout out to David Sachs. But the rest of it, I don't know how it's going to turn out. But what I can tell you is this looks systematically like a controlled demolition to create the absolute most powerful top 1% in the world. When you see 2008, 0% interest rates gets people very excited again. You can buy houses you can't afford, all these other things. And then you start raising interest rates. And now we're seeing foreclosures jump up. We're seeing first-time home buyers defaulting within 6 months after buying a house. And then you see these PE groups using adjustable rate mortgages in 2019 and not mortgages, but loans in 2019 and 2020. And this is being set up at a time where in 2020, when a black swan event occurs in your nation, it's a black swan event. You can call it COVID or pandemic. There was economic shutdown for months around the world. That's going to take 20 years to recoup from statistically. Yeah. So you allow that to happen. You put these great brands, by the way. Every brand you talk. My sister is a 40-year crafter. She's been crafting forever. She's at Joann. If I'm looking for a birthday present, it's always a Joann gift card. Like the easiest way to satisfy her hunger for a gift.
They're not taking them. I have $400 worth. I'm not allowed to cash in right now because of the bankruptcy.
You can't use the gift card. It's got to be cash.
Nope. The bankruptcy trustee and the private equity fund said that they're not accepting any of them. You're not allowed to go redeem what you gave them your cash for. Nope.
Unbelievable. Yep. Unbelievable. So cash just got thrown into their pocket again in a closed loop network. Yep. But you can see how this was orchestrated for this financial collapse. So I'm hoping that Trump is exactly what Trump claims to be, because we need someone like him at the very top of the pyramid to make changes. I don't know if that'll be the case. Time will tell.
I will say that most people don't know this, but right now he is addressing and saying that he is dedicated to closing the carried interest loophole. It's not a catch-all. It's not going to fix everything. It will serve as a deterrent. Okay.
It's a good start.
It will stop making it the most attractive place for a finance bro to be. No offense to the finance bros, right? But I want to say he says that. And I hope that he's dedicated to the task. The problem is that they also just announced that a private equity fund alliance has now launched a $10 million going to a $25 million advertising campaign to convince the world, and you should share this ad campaign. It is hysterical to me. All of the jobs they create and how they shouldn't have to pay taxes because they're creating the jobs. And I want to be clear. Like, they are literally launching a campaign right now to get all of their money to stop Trump from closing the carried interest loophole.
Sure.
Not only do we need to close the carried interest loophole, which is an essential first step that has to be achieved. We need to all back Trump doing that. We need to get him to do that because it almost happened in 2021. And Kristen Sinema took that private equity money and she voted against it. Yep. She was the deciding vote. Not only did it almost happen, it needs to happen. But unless we can get through enterprise liability and start creating a standard that if they take on the debt, they bear responsibility when they over leverage something, then it's never going to change. I will also say this because a lot of people don't like what I'm about to say. Trump firing Alvaro Bedoya and Rebecca Slaughter from the FTC, in my opinion, unlawfully, is the biggest mistake he could have made. They were actually fighting this. And I hope they win their lawsuits and they get reinstated. Maybe he just wanted to look like it and he knows they're going to win their lawsuits and get reinstated. I don't know. But he letting them go was the biggest mistake he could have made in this private equity battle.
That's a topic I didn't know anything about. Can you briefly walk me through what they were doing to get rid of the carried interest?
So right now, it's not just carried interest. You talked about antitrust laws earlier, and they were
the biggest problem we have in this country.
Well, the problem is our antitrust laws were all drafted in literally 1930. They never conceived of a marketplace where people wouldn't pay for things, that small businesses didn't count as consumers. And so unfortunately, our antitrust laws are woefully ill-equipped to deal with the consolidation we have right now. Yes. For instance, our antitrust laws say that you have to be fixing market prices for consumers. Well, Facebook is free. Right. There is no price fixing, but they are fixing prices for every small business in America when they need to access their advertising. So is Google. Yes. They don't count. And it's free. Google, it's free for consumers. So our antitrust laws are ill-equipped to deal with that. We need advances. But they were resurrecting use of the Robinson-Patman Act, which is an act that makes it unlawful for big monopolies to go and over leverage their buying power to lock out small businesses from getting the same kinds of discounts and supply chain pricing that they get. And they were going after that and working on finding ways to expand use of our existing antitrust laws, since Congress seems unwilling to even budge on modernizing them to actually
Completely
act
unwilling.
on behalf of these small businesses. And they were doing a good job. Lena Khan was winning cases that started under Trump's first term. She was doing his work. So I think that they're going to have to get in line if they want this populist message and they want this new populist appeal they have gained with broad swaths of the working class economy to stick. They better start recognizing the people that were in their government that were serving it, because Alvaro Bedoya and Rebecca Slaughter were serving it. Lena Khan was serving it. They were working to save these small businesses and to break up these monopolies, despite woefully ill-equipped laws. Now, Trump says he wants to close the carried interest loophole. We need to see him do it. That is a big first step. I hope Alvaro and Rebecca are reinstated. You're not allowed. They are one of the 5 federal agencies that are required to be bipartisan at all times. There are 5 commissioners. One is the chairperson. Okay. Right now, all we have are 2 Republicans. He just fired the 2 Democrat appointed ones that were, frankly, J.D. Vance is a huge fan of it. J.D. Vance loved Lena Khan and the work that they were doing. Matt Gaetz, if he had been at the DOJ or the Attorney General, Matt Gaetz was a fan of Lena Khan and wanted to work with her office. I actually think that's one of the reasons that they targeted him so aggressively to not have him put in there. He's an antitrust buster.
Yeah.
Now,
It
doesn't matter how you feel about him. On this issue, he and I aligned. On this issue, J.D. Vance and I aligned. And so seeing that happen is really upsetting. And I really hope Trump realizes that they need to be there and we need to be working for this, or the middle class will cease to exist. And so will the working and small business class.
But Tiffany, where did you come from? Good Lord. You're a fireball. I love you. You are incredible. I honestly can't. And you were a sommelier before all this. Like this just
I was a sommelier. I grew up in a foster household. I come from Las Vegas. I had a weird childhood. I have a weird background. I feel like I've lived 3 lives, but this is my life now. And I've decided this is it. This is where I'm staying. So
well, you were called to it from a higher power for certain, because what you went through lit a spark, and you can tell. Good grief, man! Normally I talk to people and I feel like I'm pretty well researched. I feel woefully under equipped to speak with you. I didn't know anything about the FTC, and I'm one of the guys who have been talking about antitrust when people are talking about the stock market. I'm like, okay, that's great, but what about the monopolies? Where I've been the small business guy who got shut out of all kinds of stuff because I wasn't part of the club. And there is a club, make no mistake, and they run the world, and they have all the lobbying dollars. So the FTC, I'm going to start talking about that a lot more. I'm going to give you credit and share your videos on that, of course. That's something I didn't know anything about. Antitrust laws, we need to revamp them. You are absolutely correct there, from the 1930s where credit didn't exist. By the way, credit only came into play, consumer credit, 4 years after going off the gold standard. There was definitely a purpose behind that, because you can't conquer a nation by sword. You conquer it by debt. And we are all debt slaves. We are all tax slaves. And without voices like yours in this world, I honestly don't know where the average person would be, because they'll look at someone like me and say, oh, he's been in Wall Street and all this other stuff, and not listen. And that's okay. I don't blame any of you for judging me. You don't know me and I don't know you, but I love you. And we can all get along. But having people coming from experience and taking this type of effort in the world and taking it to the man the way that you're doing it, I will support you in any way I can. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you so much for coming on. How can people find you out there? Most of the people watching this probably already know how to find you, but for my listeners, my small group, how can they find you and where can they find you?
On TikTok and YouTube, I'm at Tiffany Cianci. And because of my former career before I retired, on X and on Instagram, I am the Vino Mom.
The Vino Mom. I love it. Yep. I love it. My wife will love you too, by the way. Tiffany, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all you're doing, going around and sharing this information. I probably had, before I saw your video, I probably had 60 or 70 people DM it to me and go, can you explain this to me on one of your podcasts? Because I'll do a live and break down things. And I was just fortunate enough that we have a mutual contact that said, hey, would you like to have her on your show yesterday? I'm like, absolutely. I would love to have her on. You just saved me about 45 minutes of talking about something that I'd have to learn that night. So this has been fantastic. And Tiffany, we just wish you all the best. Please let me know off air how I can get involved in helping and supporting you in any of these ventures. I'd love to talk to you about open source, decentralized AI. It is a benefit to humanity if it's open sourced and decentralized. If it's centralized closed loop, like they're trying to build with Stargate, guys, that's a digital prison, and there's no narrative that you can spin to change my mind with what I know. So please, let's connect. Let's see what we can do off cam. I'm not a content creator. I don't really care about. I do this for fun, but I'd love to help you any way I can. So Tiffany Cianci, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all you're doing, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.